So today's session, we are going to talk about two kinds of stress. One, I have been, thank you, sir, Professor Panda, and the whole team of ATAL for giving me this platform to speak on stress management. I have been working on this for the last 2 decades. And as sir has already mentioned, I have been closely associated with the counseling center IIT Kharagpur. And as teachers, we often come across different kinds of stresses. But as I said initially, that today there are two important areas that I will talk about. One is the general stress that a teacher or a student faces, primarily in the academic status, and as well as the academic activities. So beyond that, so when I talk about that, one is as a faculty, we have to publish or perish, or we have to get our sponsorships and fundings, and we also need to see that all these are in place along with our academics as well as our teaching. So being in IIT, in the IIT system, we are always under the threat of being marked by given negative feedback by students. So we always have to be at our toes regarding the teaching, as well as also need to have some amount of consultancy along with our research projects. Now, so this is one area of stress that the activities that may induce stress. But the other aspect that is that we have all gone through, or we are all going through at this current time period, is stress in the COVID era. So it's a different kind of thing which the world is facing. So we had probably we never thought twice earlier about moving out of the house. There was no threat perceived, but now the threats are very real, and we often come across a lot of information regarding physical threats that could actually damage our well-being. Not only that, also be life threatening. So the COVID era has brought in a new kind of stress. So it's more of psychological, but the inputs on the media have also, and inputs from the environment also make us feel more threatened physically. So I would like to cover both these areas in our presentation today, and along with that, I want this to be an interactive session. I can see that there are around 40 participants at this point in time. So I would like it to be more interactive. So the presentation or the discussion today would be more of on the lines of what is stress, how we can deal with it on an individual level, and what are the special stressors that we are facing in this pandemic, and how to deal with these kind of stressors. Okay. Online education has taken us by storm, and almost all of us, even if we did practice online education earlier, or perhaps were participating in webinars, but we didn't have to do it 24/7. If you are in the corporates, I was just doing a study on from the Pan IIT system. I was representing IIT Kharagpur on online education across the country. We could see that most of the teachers are more stressed today. Not only teachers, even the students are more stressed today because of this full shift to the online forums. So now that is also another kind of stressor. Now, what is stress? How is it different from anxieties, or is it the same as anxiety? What if I have suddenly started developing different kinds of illnesses? How to deal with that? Should I go to a doctor? Should I are these related to COVID, or is it that if I'm more stressed, shall I have COVID? So these are stuff that we will discuss. And how can we deal with it individually? When should we intervene? When do we need clinical intervention? And so basically these are some of the things that I'll cover today. I have around 50 slides, but since this is the last session, I am not going to go through those 50 slides. I'll share my slides with the team, and I'm sure they can share it with the participants, all of you. So we will leave it to, maybe I will skip a few slides and discuss the essentials. So to start off with this, just, I don't know if, is this
Yes, it's visible, ma'am.
it's visible? Great. Okay. So, okay, to start with stress. So, what is stress? Now, almost everybody is familiar with the term stress. And sometimes, of course, we conveniently use it for other kinds of terminologies as well, especially for anxiety. But there are differences. So, what is stress? Stress can be defined as a response of the body to any demand placed on it. Now, stress could be because of external or internal factors. Now, one thing we'll have to understand is stress is not always bad. Okay, stress, to an extent, stress helps us to perform well. And stress is just a stimulus demand on the body. Now, that could be from within or from outside. Now, it is so why it is not necessary that each individual will behave in the same way for stress. So individuals behave differently. Now why is that? Because it stress depends on how an individual perceives the stimulus. For example, you will often see that there are several individuals who get stressed very easily. If there is, to give you an example, if I came here for this talk, and since today morning, just to give you a real time example, since today morning I have been receiving mails from our computer center that the NK in is not working, not functioning across the nation, and we will there's going to be a internet outage. So probably I will not be able to conduct this session. Now, there are different ways as to how one would behave towards this stimulus. So when I receive this input, one way could be that I could just throw a fit and say, oh my God, what will happen? So because I have received 3 or more mails since morning, so that could be one way of dealing with it. If there was another individual who could be, much more calm as compared to me, and that individual could have said that, well, this is 12 o'clock right now, my session is at 3, so there is no reason to get so hyper. Let's see what happens. Now, the two perceptions are different, and as you can well understand that because the perceptions are different, the stressor that will affect, or rather how the individual perceives stress, will be different. So the stimulus is the same. It's the same email that I have received along with my colleague. Now, I could respond differently to it, and my colleague could respond differently to it. Now, that would make us think of this situation as a either as a stressful situation, or as the intensity could be low for the other person. Now, depending on the perception of how we see that stressor, is the ability to cope with the situation. So if I think that, oh my God, what will happen, I don't think I will be able to do this session today. If I think this way, my responses would definitely be more on the lines of a catastrophe. So, like, there's nothing to be done. But, and I would probably not be thinking of the options. But on the other hand, if I thought that, okay, let's wait and see what happens, then I would probably have a backup plan or two. So probably I would use my mobile data or try some other ways of dealing with it. Right. So perhaps I would share the slides or record the talk or something of that kind. Now, all this, so as you can understand, how one copes with the situation depends on the perception of the stressor. Now, the individual's judgment that a stressful situation exists initiates a stress response. Of course, this is not always true for all kinds of stressors. For most of the stressors, this is true. That if one thinks that this is a stressful situation, there is a stress response. And what are stress responses? So, stress responses can be of physiological kinds, psychological kinds. We'll come to that. So, without this appraisal of a stressor, the individual might face the stimulus in a much more calmer way. So, even so, the intensity of the stressor in affecting the person will be much lesser. So I spoke about stress appraisal. I will not go into the details of this. So you can go through this slide later on. So this is basically what I am talking about when I say that if the primary appraisal of the stressor is different, then the secondary appraisal will be the resultant behavior will also be different, and resultant thoughts will also be different. So if I think that speaking in front of the class I might make a fool of myself, then my appraisal of my qualities will be more negative as compared to, okay, if I thought that it's no big deal if I can't speak in front of groups. So there is then the threat or the stress will not be perceived. Now this depends, so as I said, it depends on the appraisal or the perception of the stressor. Now, coming to stress specifically. So, when an individual is stressed, what are the different kinds of stress that an individual could have? One is acute stress. And from acute stress, so acute stress is what an individual is going through at a particular point of time, which is a heightened form of stress. So, suddenly, there are lots of people at this point in time during this pandemic who have lost their jobs, and that if a person was moving in a smooth way in his job, in his functioning, daily functioning, but suddenly because of the pandemic, that is where the individual has no role to control the situation, if he loses his job, that would be an acute stressor. It is immediate and the intensity of the stressor is high. Now, it could also be acute stress, could also be episodic acute stress. So, so if it is like, just to carry on with this example, that every month at the around the end of the month, if I know, if I'm working in the corporate and I know that, well, somebody will lose his job. And, so every month end, I am anxious, I'm stressed that, oh my God, I just hope it's not me. So that would be, stress, acute stress. So that's heightened stress, but at a temporal, level. The other is chronic stress. So chronic stress is continued stress. Now, for episodic acute stress, the same effects are displayed. So, as I said, every month end, I face that same stress about losing a job. And acute stress has severe negative health impacts. So, it affects the health. And it is also important to understand that personality is an important factor in acute stress. There are some individuals who get stressed, as I said, very easily, and their stress level is heightened at an instance. So it could be heightened at, oh my God, I may lose a job. Oh my God, I cannot speak for a public session. Oh my God, I can't attend an interview. Oh my God, I can't write this paper. Oh my God, I have to face the director for a meeting. So now these situations are different, but the catastrophization, the amount of intensity of the stressor felt by the individual is almost the same. Now, these situations understandably would cause stress to any normal individual, but probably the intensity would not be, to the ceiling for every situation. But for people who have a specific kind of personality, there's something called type A personality. So these people are very, very driven in their functioning, and to them, they get stressed very easily. Now, some of the symptoms of acute stress are hyperarousal. So it's like they are super alert. Now, when I say super alert, it does not mean on the positive side. So it's not that the individual is like very, very cautious. What I'm trying to say is that the slightest sound or the slightest, stimulus makes the person jittery. So there are people who are like, oh my God, what happened? So, they keep getting, they respond to the slightest of stimulus, and they respond to it as if it's a threat. Most of these individuals suffer from persistent tension headaches. Now, you have to understand that there are around 21 kinds of headaches, approximately. Okay. And most of the times when we these get diagnosed or misdiagnosed as migraines, sinusitis, etc. Now, these migraine and tension headaches, they generally have an overlapping symptom pattern. So, tension headaches, one very important thing is that these areas get as if, there's a press, there's something just on the top of the head pressing down, and these in front of the eyes, and here just on top of the eyelids, and here this starts paining. So these are it's a very, very common feature that is seen with stress. So tension headaches are a very common symptom that happens with episodic acute stress. Hypertension, so that's high blood pressure. Okay, hypertension does not mean high tension, so it is related to blood pressure. I'm sure all of you are aware of that. Chest pain and digestion problems. And these individuals, because of their personality patterns, unless they take up some conscious effort to change themselves, they are resistant to change. So no matter how much of medicines they take, it may give you slow relief or immediate relief, but not for long. So if somebody is has tension headaches, uh, um, an analgesic might reduce the headache for that period of time, but again another stressor will induce the headache. Similarly, indigestion and hypertension may be managed, but when there is a stimulus, external stimulus, which is anxiety provoking or stress provoking, it causes a rise in blood pressure. Similarly, with digestion problems. So these people are generally resistant to change. Chronic stress. Now, that's a long time stressor that an individual is going through for days and years together. So, warfare, most of these are related to geopolitical situations and economic crisis. Okay, so also dysfunctional family patterns. So, if there is a child who is facing who is seeing parental conflicts daily, that would be a chronic stressor. If you are in a job where you don't like it, you don't like the people, you don't like your job, and you have to still keep on working, there is chronic stress. And this, because chronic stress grows about for a long time, and most of the time it is not within our control. All these experiences, all these, if you just look through the bullets, they are not within the individual's control. So that brings about a learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is like, is a terminology that is used to explain when a person does not try out any way of coming out of the stressor. So it's more like, it's even no matter what I do, I cannot get away from this. So there's a sense of helplessness that prevails. Now, chronic stress, because it continues for day in, day out, and for a longer period in time, it brings out this sense of learned helplessness. Some of the common signs of stress. So there are physical signs, and as I mentioned, psychological signs. So physical signs could be dry mouth, difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, or rapid breathing, pounding heart, stomach ache, chronic headache. So these could be the immediate signs or physical signs of stress. Psychological signs generally stay for a longer period, and these are irritability, problems concentrating, difficulty sleeping, narrowed perception, frequent feelings of fatigue, etc. One of the things as teachers you will notice, be it for yourselves or for students, that mostly the when a person is stressed, in fact for students all the more, you'll see that they report with, I cannot focus my attention, I cannot concentrate, I cannot remember things. Even with us, when you are disturbed, we generally try to be we cannot recall things. We have these lapses of memory, which otherwise maybe not a part of our disposition. Two more very important points for a stressor is stress affects appetite and digestion, and I should add sleep. Okay, and the other is stress affects cognition. So the cognitive processing speed generally reduces. So if I say cognitive processing speed, what do I mean? So if a person would otherwise be able to solve problems, I'm not talking of riddles or Sudoku, but I'm talking of daily problems faster. Now this person is, if a person is stressed, he might get very jittery and have confusions in deciding things. He might ask people, ki nahi batao, what would be the right way to deal with this, so there is this sense of helplessness that prevails. There's this sense of low confidence. And another very important factor in stress, a sign of stress, is that the person loses motivation to do anything. So how is stress different from anxiety? Most of the times the stress and anxiety are used synonymously, or there is an overlap between the terms that's used. The stress is generally short term, okay, and in response to a threat, so in response to a particular stimulus. For anxiety, most of the times there may not be an identifiable trigger. So a person, so that's why anxiety lasts longer, and it may disturb a person to the effect that he cannot do his daily functioning. To give you an example of anxiety disorder, there are a lot of people who suffer from general anxiety disorder, which is generalized anxiety disorder, where there is a free floating anxiety about almost everything under the sun. Stress would be an internal or an external stimulus, and that would be restricted to that condition. So the responses would be limited to the perception of the stressor. But for anxiety, it's a part of the whole disposition. So I might not be able to say what is making me anxious, but I'm anxious. Okay, I might be having a lot of panic related symptoms. So fast heartbeat, faster breathing, irritable bowels, sweating, nervousness, all that, restlessness, and all these symptoms, surprisingly, are also seen in stress. But as I said, anxiety is for a longer period in time, and it's more than 2 weeks. That's why, for the diagnosis of an anxiety disorder, we check whether, and there are different kinds of anxiety disorders: generalized anxiety disorder, specific phobias, obsessive compulsive disorders, socialized anxiety disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder. So now these are, why do I call it a disorder? These have diagnostic criteria for it, and it requires more than 2 weeks for the individual to suffer from these symptoms. And it is irrespective of whether that stressor is present or not, the person might feel anxious. So, just to bring out that example of the individual who, has the stressor of losing his job at the end of the month, if even if that stressor is no longer there, he might feel the symptoms of anxiety. No, because that stressor is not there. If the threat for losing the job is not there, even if the symptoms still persist, then it would be, and for days together, then it would be amounting to an anxiety disorder. Um, so it is important to understand the physiology of stress. One of the major causes or major reasons that we need to understand the stress or the anxiety physiology is, if you are aware of it, then you can deal with it and you will know how to deal with it. So, it's no point saying that you take a deep breath or, go for a walk unless you know. And because we are all, you know students of science, so we would like to understand what is evidence based. So it's not like, it's written in literature that if you take a morning walk and look at the sun, you will feel good. There's definitely a physiology, a mechanics that is related to this whole symptomatology and to deal with it. And that is how, medicines come into being. That is how all these psychotherapies, all these clinical therapies to deal with it come into being. So the reason is, in stress, the brain goes through several neural and chemical reactions. And these have to be dealt with, okay, by the brain. So what does the brain do? So generally, when there is a stressor that is perceived by the brain instructs the rest of the body to respond to the stressor or adjust to it. So there's a wonderful theory by Hans Selye known as general adaptation syndrome, and that speaks about, when we face a stressor. So there's a stimulus from outside that causes stress. First, the body tries to adapt to it. If it cannot adapt, if it's a stressor, if it's against the body mechanism, say if it's a virus and it's against the body mechanisms, then the body tries to fight it. So there is this so first there's the alarm reaction, that the body is aware. Next, there is a resistance. So the body tries to fight the stressor. So what does it do? It raises the temperature of the body to kill the foreign elements. So it tries to kill the foreign elements by raising the temperature of the body. So we have fever. So that point in time, we are actually trying to fight the foreign element, be it a bacteria, be it a virus. But after that, the body, if the body can fight the stimulus, then fight the stressor, then okay, fine, fever is there. And after a couple of days, say 6 days, 7 days, the fever is gone and you are fine. But if it is that the body cannot resist the stressor, it's like a fist fight. Okay. Then the body succumbs to the stressor. And when the body succumbs to the stressor, that is when the diseases affect us. So it's the same. If you can use this same phenomena for, be it COVID, be it any other bacterial infection, be it any immunodeficiency disease. So in any of these immunodeficiency diseases also, it's the same phenomena that happens. That's why you will see that most of the times for COVID, you will see all the information, telling us, even from, be it from WHO or be it from CDC, or here in India from ICMR, they'll tell you that, well, you keep your immune system well, you exercise, you keep your immune system better. So what are the suggestions on? The suggestions is to make the body ready to fight, to resist the foreign element. In this case, the virus. So, say, for example, I will not go through this example because I just had a spoke about it. So, see, so what are the physiological systems involved in the stress response? So most of the times, there are three systems that are at play in a stress or in an anxiety response. One is the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system. And there are different parts of the nervous system that act on it. And as I initially mentioned, that this happens with every stressor. Okay, and it's not necessary that stresses are bad. So there are uh, two kinds of stress. One is that helps us optimize our performance. The other is, so it's like an inverted U or a bell-shaped curve, where if you draw the O dash, the optimal in the center, that's the highest peak. So there, that's a peak of the graph. So uh, till then, if there is an increase in stress, it will improve your performance. So if the performance is on the y-axis, and if thereafter, if there is an increase in stress, the stress being in the x-axis, then your performance will fall, just as in the bell-shaped curve. So the optimal, till the optimal amount of stress for reaching the highest performance, that is known as U stress. But the stress after that, which actually affects the performance, is known as distress. Okay, and we are all familiar with distress. So whenever we talk about stress management, we actually talk about distress management. Okay, so when there is a stress response in the brain, the sense organs, the from our different parts of the body, so there are 5 sense organs, but along with that there are sensory receptors in different parts of the body. So these receptors, they send information to the amygdala. Amygdala is a small bean like structure in the brain that is actually responsible for evaluation of emotion. Okay, so it sends information and to the amygdala, and which interprets images and sounds and sends a distress signal. So it evaluates the stressor and sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is just below the thalamus. Okay, and that is why it is known as hypothalamus. So the thalamus is the relay center of the brain. The hypothalamus is actually the control center of the brain. So hypothalamus is a very, very small structure, but it actually controls most of our body mechanisms. It helps in maintaining homeostasis, and it is very important in the sympathetic activation. So it helps in releasing hormones in the body, especially for stress. And there are three parts that are involved. So one is this, this is known as the HPA axis. So the hypothalamic pituitary axis that comes into play in body's natural reaction to stress. And what the HPA does is it involves the nervous system and the endocrine system. So HPA stands for hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland. So these three structures are involved. So when there is a stress, so when one experiences a stressful event, say right now I am taking this session, and just outside my door I hear a bark and a dog barking, and a very ferocious looking big dog enters the room. Okay, so that's a stressful event. Undoubtedly, I will not be all smiles looking at the dog. And so what happens to the body? So the body releases the hypothalamus. The body receives this information, in this case the auditory sensor and the visual sensors. So these receptors, my eye and my ear, receive that information, sends it to the amygdala. Amygdala assesses that, well, this is a distressing situation, and sends it to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus releases a hormone known as corticotropin hormone, or just remember CRH, that sends signals to the pituitary gland, and there we get the hormone known as ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. And ACTH travels to the adrenal gland, and from there, glucocorticoids are released. And one very important glucocorticoid is cortisol, which has a very important level, relationship to stress. So, cortisol level, when it is increased, there are two hormones that are secreted from the adrenal medulla. So that's epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now, these two hormones are related to the sympathetic activation. And what is that? So, epinephrine, it circulates throughout the body and brings about certain physiological changes. Heart starts pumping more blood, and this starts beating faster, so it pumps more blood, it pushes the blood to the vital organs, whichever is required. So if I see this dog and I have an option of running away from the back, then my legs would require more blood. If I see this dog and I know that there is no way of, my back is against the wall, I cannot run away, then I'll get ready to fight. So this immediate thinking, immediate action plan, all that is requires blood flow. But the blood flow within the body is constant. So it requires the blood to be pushed to these organs specifically. Right. So naturally the breathing becomes more rapid to, also take in more oxygen for functioning effectively. And it increases alertness, sight, hearing. So all our sense organs become more active. So this is the general stress related physiological change that happens. But as you can well understand, the body cannot go on like this for hours together. So even if the heart beats faster, after a point in time, the heart calms down. So the body returns to its own state. And this, especially, when the threat passes. So this break is brought about by the parasympathetic nervous system. But for some people, this activation does not reduce quickly. Okay, so what happens? So, especially with chronic low level stress, if there's a continuous stressor, okay, then this hypothalamic pituitary axis is activated, and it keeps affecting the body, especially with, it is like it destroys the body slowly, like a slow poison. So it harms the digestive systems, it harms the thought processes, cognitive systems, and other brings about other immunodeficiency disorders. Especially another thing that affects is endocrinal problems. So one example would be, say, if a person is suffering from chronic stress for a long time, you will see that such people develop a lot of irritable bowel syndrome. They have problems with their bowel systems, they have problems with ulcers. Okay, so maybe they have gallbladder problems or ulcer problems. The reason is that there's a higher secretion of acid that perforates the stomach walls, and this higher secretion of acid happened because of the stresses. Now the for any stressor, this HP axis is activated, but it comes down again. So it gets deactivated soon for most of the cases. So, like if you were walking down the road and you suddenly saw a car moving by, you responded quickly. That response, for that quick response, the HP axis had to be activated. And it happened so fast that even before you realize it, you have stepped back. Okay. So all this, but after you step back, after a few minutes, you are normal. So that high pumping of heart, the shortness of breath, that doesn't continue. But if there's a chronic stressor, every day for days together, then that would affect the whole body mechanisms and bring about illnesses. And as I mentioned, it weakens the immune system. Okay, so I spoke about the stress appraisal. Now, getting to this is also, again, I repeat the same slide because it's not only the physiology, but the physiology combined with the way we see things, how we perceive things, actually brings about, the ailments or the stress. Now, there are different ways of measuring stress. So there are stress scales, there are cognitive measures. So, personality patterns, as I said, what is the coping pattern? How have you dealt with stress earlier? There are electrodermal or biological ways of measuring stress by different cardiovascular indices, by checking out the epinephrine, norepinephrine level and other hormones, especially cortisol level. And of course, you can use EEG. Some people do use imaging techniques. I personally use electrophysiology. So I use electrodermal activity for checking stress, anxiety levels, so in a cognitive task. And I use galvanic skin response recorder. So it basically does nothing but measures the electrical activity between two sensor points. Now, along with that, there are as one moves up in the stressor, so then in a temporal period, people check out for a physical exam and a psychological evaluation, that okay, what are the organs that are being affected by the stress, especially if there is, as I mentioned, if there is an immunodeficiency along with it, and of course how an individual deals with that stressor, so coping skills. So all these are different ways of measuring stress, but we are not going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about simple ways of stress mapping. So if I ask you to, if or rather if you ask me that, well, I am stressed, what do I do? I can always suggest that you look up stress scales on Google. Okay, and you will get 7 minute stress test, other different job stress, home stress, domestic stress, COVID stress, all kind of scales. Now, that is not a desirable way to deal to measure your stress. Why? Because these are most tests, if you are not looking at authentic websites, those would be university websites or journals, as you already know, then these corporate sites, or rather commercial sites, they are offer scales that are not standardized. And by a number 15, you have got 15 on 35, it doesn't mean anything. Specifically, more so because that may not be a valid judgment. Okay, so as a psychologist, I would always advise, don't try all these online stress tests, online intelligence tests, and things like that. Most of the times, these are highly fictitious. But on the other hand, for stress, you can do something. You can follow a do-it-yourself technique, like stress mapping. So you can identify the stresses in your environment. You can maintain a stress journal or notebook where you write down the times when your stressor happens. So, for example, if you signs of stress happen, for example, if you have a headache, if you have a constant headache frequently, okay, you can write down when exactly do you have headaches. So as a clinician, I often get calls nowadays of people reporting that the headaches have increased. Okay, so I often suggest them to write down, maintain this notebook, and check out for themselves that is the stressor the strain of the computer, because our computer activity, our online activity has increased multifold, or is it any other stress that is bringing about the headache? Okay, many times, more often than not, especially as I'm talking about the COVID era, there are a lot of people who are stressed because they have elderly people at home. So it's not only as an anxiety or a stressor related to their self harm because of COVID. but it is more that, if I am asymptomatic and I bring COVID home without my knowledge, I may, create life risks for my elderly parents, or, my baby who is very small. So that can be a stressor. Many people are, so as I said, it's important to identify that which what is the symptom, and when you are getting to see these symptoms of stress, what are the triggers that are bringing about, if it's a headache, so what is bringing that on. There are many people who say that, I'm becoming more irritable right now. So what exactly is making you irritable? Is it the is it the kind of functioning? Because at this point in time, a lot of us are not being able to interact. If people went to the gym activities are closed. A couple of months earlier, we had to restrict ourselves completely to home and not go out even for a walk. So are these also affecting? So what exactly, a one format that you could use for a stress journal would require date and time, signals of stress, duration of the symptoms, how long does it last? If you have a headache, how long does it last? How often do you get it? What happens just before? What happens after? And is there anything significant that brings about a change? So any other comment? So if you stress journal is not very effective if you do it once in a while, but if you keep doing it, if you keep following a stress journal, you will get apps on these, a lot of apps. So also relating to your mood. So if it is that my sleep has been affected, I cannot wake up early, or I feel very tired, once I wake up, that could be a stressor. So what is happening? Is it because you're sleeping very late? Somebody can say that, well, I always slept late, I generally prepare for my classes at night. So then definitely, then earlier, at what time would you get up? Has it Are you feeling more lethargic? So what are the additional symptoms that you're facing? So once you have a record of at least a month, you will be able to identify. Even you don't need to do it for a month, even if you do it regularly for around 2 weeks, you'll be able to identify the links, the associations between the stressor, the symptoms, and what helps or what aggravates the stress reaction. So now, as I mentioned, some of the stresses during the COVID era, especially for students, virtual classes, stuck at home, no social contact. Now this is not specifically for students only, because I was just conducting a session for another institute a couple of days ago, and so there the faculties were telling me that no, it's not only for students, it's also for us. So it's low social contact with friends, no going out, no physical exercise, all these are affecting all of us. So irrespective of at which career point we are standing, irrespective of what our future focus is. So either ways, say for example, for myself, I have a lab where I do experiments with humans. Okay, so my lab has been closed for the last 9 months. My students have gone home, so I have to maintain all my equipment. I'm really worried about the equipment, especially because these are very, very high end, expensive stuff. As I said, I use electrophysiology. So if these get spoiled, damaged in some way because of no use, then how would I deal with it? On the other hand, the expenditure incurred to be incurred in future would be really high. On the other hand, there are no students, so what about their uh, plans? How will we be able to finish the work henceforth also? Because one of my work is with dementia, the other is with young adults, and the other is, another area is with children. So I will probably not be able to get these people even if we get back to normal life. These two extreme groups, I'll not be able to get them immediately to the lab. So how the hell shall we be able to continue? Pardon my language, but it causes me anxiety even if I speak about it. So worried about future plans. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, health anxieties. And health anxieties aggravate, it's not because of only what we see or what we read, but it's also because of what the media presents us. Again, there is always a statistical error about it. So we go by, or rather I should say, a statistical bias about it. No matter what the numbers are, it's when we talk about when we see people around us, and if anybody has been affected drastically by COVID, then that's an absolute number for us. So it that panics us more, especially, as I said, if you know of people who've had life threatening experiences of, or who have expired. Media, thankfully, or now is more responsible as compared to a couple of months earlier. In fact, I did a study on fake news, misinformation and fake news, and how it actually affects our psychological well-being. Okay, and we saw that it is very tough to even identify a fake news. Another problem with news, with media at this point in time, is we are getting a lot of negative information. It's not that it is a lot of negative information by the media, but it's because right now we are focusing more on the media because of our computer use, internet usage. So we get to hear of and especially after the Sushant Singh Rajput and several other suicides, in the even there was a one in day before yesterday, so of a Bollywood personality. So all these are affecting us adversely. So economic, we get to hear about the economic conditions. A distractor is definitely the US elections. It is, we are not directly affected by it, but it is a distractor from COVID related news. There are a lot of people who have, who got more hyper, more affected because of going through so much of news. And, especially about deaths due to COVID. Now, how do you deal with all these inputs? One would be limiting your media consumption and building on the critical skills. So, because it is very tough to identify between fake news and fact. So, first try and analyze who made this, why did they make it, is it against something or someone, are they trying to get a big reaction from me, or just inform me? This is a very, very important point. So what is left out in this content? And one very important way to see the news is this news making you feel emotional, that's angry, sad, smug, or just taking note of the information? So most of the sites, especially where they are government sites, if it's ICMR will not give you an information, or WHO will not give you an information with an emotional tone in it. If there is an emotional tone in it, then you just be wary of it. Be it fake or be it real, you need to be just wary of it. The moment you are wary of it, you will not be affected emotionally by that input. Now, so how do you deal with the stress, be it as a student or as a faculty? Self-care. Now, physical exercise, sleep hygiene, healthy eating, cognitive exercise, these are important. What is a cognitive exercise? Physical exercise, we understand. Okay, what is cognitive exercise? Cognitive exercise is doing some kind of cognitive activity that is beyond your work. Okay, so it's not like, well, I have to prepare for my class, I'm practicing, I'm preparing, so that's my cognitive exercise. That's not cognitive exercise. If you are, it's like, I often hear students, when I tell them that please do some physical exercise, they will tell me that yes, I ride my bicycle to my department, which is around 1.5 kilometers. So I have definitely done a lot of physical exercise. No, that was part of the job. That was part of your daily activity. So that's not counted as physical exercise. Similarly, you have to take that effort for cognitive exercise or for physical exercise. Cognition means thinking, using your analytical skills, using memory, using attention. Okay, and as I said, executive functions. So that's, decision making, problem solving. So now engage in some kind of cognitive exercise which is beyond the purview of your work. Sleep hygiene. What is sleep hygiene? Sleep hygiene is, try and get up at the same time every day and go to bed at the same time. So it shouldn't be that, I go to bed at 2, I get up at 8, I go to bed the next couple of days, I go to bed at 3, I get up at 10, and it goes on. And then, as the uh, awaken hours increase at night, your waking up gets delayed. One very important thing to notice here is that most of the times people will say that, oh, I slept so late so I woke up late. It should be the other way around, that, oh, you got up so late, that's why you slept so late. So even if you sleep at 2 and you wake up by 6, maybe the first day you'll have a headache. Maybe the second day you'll feel a little better. Third day, or you'll feel sleepy in the afternoon. But from the third day, you will by default fall asleep quickly. So these are important ways. So focus on things you can control. Okay. Not, you know, like what will happen? Oh God, when will this COVID end? That doesn't help. Seeking out social support. And I often hear students here tell me that, well, I have 5,000 friends. Unfortunately, when I ask them for the mobile numbers and email IDs of two of their friends, or tell me the birthdays of two of their friends, they cannot. So it's when I speak about talking to friends, I don't mean FB. In fact, even not WhatsApp, it would be a desirable idea to interact with individuals physically. Now, physically at this point in time, if it is not as possible, then do it over telephone, but at least interact. It's important to understand and admit that you're feeling stressed instead of pretending, oh, no, this is actually nothing, I just I just feel tired because I didn't sleep, and something else. Because if you admit and if you realize, then you can manage it better. Now, there are some ways of self control. Okay, the primary ways of self control is understand when you are doing any negative self talk. So, mujhse nahi hoga. It's impossible. This is going from bad to worse. Understand that negative talk, write it down, and develop alternate positive talks. This is actually a part of cognitive therapy. I will not get into details for this, and this is actually again a part of the same thing. Changing your lifestyle. Diet, exercise, sleep, I've already mentioned. This is very very important for stress management. And you think of a plan for the future, something to look forward to. Say for myself, I love going for mountain treks, and it's been more than a year that I have gone outside, and that makes me very very demotivated. And of course, all of us are stressed with the restrictions around and stuff like that. Now, just looking forward to a trek makes me take the effort of pushing it, of exercising, of eating healthy, of sleeping properly. So you should, all of us should have something to look forward to, because it could be in the job, it could be in your personal life, and one should have a life beyond the job. So it's some kind of interest, but that need not be necessarily related to the job. Okay, so it could be photography, it could be sketching, it could be whatever, that's cricket, that's your way, or that's your preference. Relaxation. Now in relaxation, what happens is, when the brain relaxes, it does not switch off, but what it does is, there's a neural network that gets activated when the brain relaxes, that's known as the default mode network, or the DMN. And when the DMN, or the default mode network, gets activated, that is when our mind wanders or does several other associations that it wouldn't be doing when it is focusing on something. So you should find some time to relax every day. Take some time out to do something that is relaxing to you. Relaxation could be anything from exercise, walking, you know, whatever, getting a massage. Now, these are not possible, but reading a book, watching a movie, humor is a very good way of relaxing. Talking to friends. Don't say that checking out Facebook makes you relax. It doesn't really help, especially because there are very conflicting information that we come across in Facebook. So that actually does more harm than help. I'm not against Facebook, but nevertheless. So spiritual types of relaxation. There are a lot of people who practice pranayam and meditation techniques, praying. That's a very good way of relaxing. Okay. The other is, there are some clinical relaxation techniques like progressive muscular relaxation, sensory relaxation, etc. You can look these up. You will find some wonderful, wonderful videos on online. Okay. Now, so these are, so it depends on the individual as to what will help the individual to relax. So we spoke about self control. The other would be situational control. And one way of situational control, especially for, since most of the situations in an acute stress are not always within our control. If it is within our control, the idea is, stress management is possible from two perspectives. One is, feel, let your body be calm so that you can take the stressor. If there is a stressor from outside, you will deal with it more effectively. The other is, you have to filter out that, well, this is not within my control and this is within my control, so I'll have to deal with it. This is not within my control, so let's not put the energy and effort and time on this and waste it, because it'll just make you feel more helpless. Now, problem solving strategy is a better strategy for analyzing a situation and dealing with it. Most of the times, problem solving is done in parts. Like, we talk of problem solving from the AI perspective or the cognitive neuroscience perspective, where we talk of a search space and doing things in a recursive fashion, solving problems in a recursive way. So, similarly, you can break a big problem into small problems, right? And what can be done is, you try and say, for example, if I say that, well, um, if as I got this couple of mails today morning that, well, there is going to be no internet throughout the day, and you cannot conduct, so please excuse us, please, we apologize, we regret, there will be no internet. Okay. If at that point in time, I could use two ways. One is just catastrophize the situation, oh my god, and quit. Okay. I could write to Professor Panda and tell him that enough. Okay, I'm mostly not a very good person to deal with stress, but let me tell you that on occasions I do deal with it. So in this occasion, what did I do? I thought that let's think of a plan. Okay, so what would be the plan B? One is, first, it is 12 o'clock now. I've received mails at 8, 10, 12. Okay, so 3 mails, but I can check out that the Wi-Fi is working, the internet is working here. So at this point in time, there are glitches, but it's working more or less. If there are further glitches, what will I do? So I prepared my video, and I thought that, well, I'll check out till 2 o'clock. I'll otherwise record this session and mail it. How will I mail it? Well, I got my laptop and I got my, so I can use hotspot and use my mobile network to send it off. Okay. So now this is a plan B. So this problem solving approach makes us feel that, well, we are in control of the situation. When we start feeling, oh my God, I cannot, it's not within my hands, I cannot do anything, then we don't think of, options of doing it. When we analyze a problem and find out all possible solutions, we brainstorm for solutions, we evaluate option and select the best option, then we also feel cognitively, psychologically, that we can deal with the situation. And the moment you feel you can deal with the situation, you can deal better with the situation. Okay. So that is how the brain, takes its own feedback from the self. Okay. Now the other thing is sleep hygiene. I've spoken about sleep hygiene. Some of the tips, important tips about sleep hygiene is: sleep only when you're feeling sleepy. When you're going to bed, refrain from online activity. Don't take naps during the day. Use the bed only for sleeping. I remember when we were young, the elders told us that don't sit on the bed and study. Okay, because there are steps. So you sit on the bed, then you sit like this, then you sit like this, and finally you're lying down. And so the bed and studying gets associated with lying down. So take a bath before bed and use sunlight to set your biological clock. So we have an internal biological clock within our mechanism, and that what happens is it helps to, there are several hormones melatonin that is actually related to the biological clock. The digestive system is related to the biological clock. The body temperature is related to the biological clock. So, if you say that, well, I slept for 8 hours, but I went to sleep at 2 o'clock and I woke up late. Now, that is not desirable, because once the sun is up, your body will start behaving differently. Also, the external sounds will be more. So that's why, it's always advisable that use the biological clock or set it as per sunlight. So it's always better to get up early and go to sleep early. Okay. Now these are things that we generally do not follow in the cities. When I talk of physical exercise for stress, I speak about cardiovascular exercise. And what is a cardiovascular exercise? That increases your heart rate. So anything that makes you sweat, makes your heart beat faster, but not to the effect that you cannot speak, not to the effect that you are gasping for breath. So if you walk at a pace of 6 kilometers per hour, increase it to 7 kilometers. So you will, perspire, feel a little short of breath, but it's not that you will pant and you cannot talk. That is the kind of exercise that is desirable. Okay, I just spoke about brisk walking, but it could be cycling, swimming, skipping, dancing. Yoga is not necessarily a cardiovascular exercise. As you will see, it does not increase the heart rate. I'm talking of most of the yoga exercises. Now, cardiovascular exercise is related to stress. One of the reasons being that it is directly correlated with the serotonin transmission, or I should say serotonin release. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and its release is related to cardiovascular exercise, to exercise. So in talking about the broad benefits, also exercise helps in the secretion of endorphins. So dealing with pain. And when I say pain, I don't necessarily mean physical pain, but also psychological pain. So we are better able to deal with conflicts and pain. Now, of course, it makes you more alert and active. If you do not exercise, getting up from the bed takes an effort. Getting up from the chair takes an effort. But if you exercise, then you don't feel that effort. So, this is related to stress management, and it's very, very essential. Whenever we talk of, and this, I did not speak about the whole neurobiology of it, but it is very, very important. Cardiovascular exercise is very important for reducing stress. um, Cognitive enhancement, I spoke about doing some cognitive activity. The other is practicing mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is a technique, an age old technique practiced by Buddhists, and of course now it has developed into a therapeutic technique. So attending to the present moment with an attitude of openness. One important thing is to stop, to be aware whether you are talking in your mind. Most of the times, there's an inner talk that goes on. Mindfulness, you are aware that there is an inner talk, stop it. And just be like a camera looking at the world. Just accept and let it pass before you, as if you are traveling on a train and there are scenes passing by. Take up one routine task a day and complete it. Every day, morning, you get up and decide that, well, I am going to do this activity no matter what. We practice this with stress, not only stress, we also practice this with depression. So we tell individuals that, take up one task, any one task. Say depressed people don't feel motivated about doing anything. Many times, we keep procrastinating. Even as teachers, क्वेश्चन पेपर बनाना है, अच्छा कल कर लेंगे, अभी तो टाइम है. I need to correct answer scripts, कल कर लेंगे. So everything gets procrastinated. So take something up. Okay, if you don't correct the papers, at least open it and see that how many people have written all the answers, or well, how many people have but just flip through the answer scripts once. So now these are all online, so whatever, you might as well put it in a different folder and things like that. Okay. um, the other is for time management. Time management is very, very important for stress management. Most of the times, as I said, when we procrastinate and we do not plan ahead, that's why we cannot complete our chores. One difference, there's a very interesting cognitive study that shows that one difference between expert problem solvers and novices is they think steps ahead. And this was done through the game of chess. So when different states of the game was presented, the experiment was done like this. They were presented with different states of the game, both the novice and the expert. The expert could remember better, about the positions, and they could remember several of sets of positions. The novice couldn't. But when the these were standard moves on a chessboard, the expert could remember better, because the expert remembered it as a move in the play and could plan ahead, planned around 4 or 5 steps ahead. The novice just tried to remember chips and pieces on real time. Okay, so different positions, not different positions, but different pieces at different check boxes. So this was the so when it came to experts, they generally saw 4 or 5 steps ahead. They conceptualized it as movements in the chessboard, and that's why they remembered better. So this difference is, also in planning and time management. If you plan ahead, if you plan your whatever your assignments are from ahead, One, there are lots of apps available for doing that. You can do post tags on your computer or on your refrigerator, and make a list of things that you need to be doing immediately, in the next 1 week, in the next 1 month. So don't choose for a lot of work for the 1 month. Don't jump steps. Then you will just try and do it at the end of the month. So this is about a couple of tips that you could probably follow. You know, make a priority list, set goals, use humor, develop realistic goals, and keep time out from social media. So social media abstinence is probably an in thing right now with most of our students. So just to end this session, I'll share one of my experiences a couple of days ago from our lab team. I had asked an intern. He is a BTech student of electrical engineering, second year, and I gave him work, the homework, an assignment. So he told me that, well, today is a Thursday and I have he used some word. Okay, it's like abstinence from social media. Okay, so I am not going to use social media for the next 3 days. So I'm sorry, I can't do this work in the weekend. I can only do it on Monday and give it to you on Tuesday. So I really liked the way he did that, and he has been keeping up with it. And it's not only him, there are several students who have started doing it, but and several of my colleagues also. So maybe you could time out, like one of the professors, who is a Buddhist Lama. He told us in one of his sessions with that, you could what he does is, after dinner he does not use his internet. Okay. For many of us, it might not be feasible. He also added that he does not speak till the next morning. Okay. Probably for many of us, it would become a stressor. Okay. But we could choose our own ways of abstaining from social media and things like that. This is probably the final and the most important thing. You need to have an appointment with yourself. And when I say this, I don't mean, time out with other stuff, on online, but a physical time out for yourself, even if it is a 5 minute. And that's the best that could help you. No amount of medication and clinical input will be able to help you with stress beyond this. So that's about it. So um, I have nothing else to share. I would like to take questions, if any. Please feel free to ask.
Yeah, thank you, madam, very much. And it's a nice talk, and hopefully, means it is much more useful compared to the technical aspects. Really, it is helpful for daily life. That is, and you completely related with the means how the physical behavior of the human body. That also you have related completely. It is. I was thinking that only you will be talking about the stress management, just like a psychological effect, something. But you have given in a very technical way also. I was going through it. Very nice. Thank you, madam. And we'll take few questions if there are a few questions from the participants.
Yes, sir, I have a question.
Yes. You first
uh,
introduce yourself, madam.
Sir, ma'am, it's Nidhi Saujani from Government Polytechnic Rajkot, Gujarat.
Okay, sure.
Uh, Ma'am, generally I follow all these things which you illustrated, but being mother or being lady, actually, we do not get time for ourselves, right? So I plan my day. I decide to do the things which I like to keep pampering myself, but I I'm not able to continue it. So what should I do in that case?
Um, okay, I understand, because I'm a woman and I'm a mother and I have a family to run as well.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's true that most of the times we have to give priority to others' interest than our own. But you must understand this, that if you don't take care of yourself, pampered yourself, as you use the word, in some way or the other every day, you will not be able to take care of the rest of the world. Okay, so if it is now, it's always, we will always have some reason not to do our own work. Okay, so as women, we generally put the others first, but it's not necessary. A man could also tell that, okay, as the primary bread earner in the Indian context, I have to go out of my home and do it. I That's why I can't do the rest of the work. So it is a fact. We accept the fact, and let's see how we can solve it, how we can use a set of problem solving strategies. One, if you try and take out a fixed time in the day for something that you will do, at that point in time, maybe it's a 15 minutes or a half an hour, be it morning walk, be it anything, your own reading time after 10 o'clock or something. People in the household will also get adjusted to it. They will move their ways to get involved and adjusted to your routine. Okay, to an extent, you will also need to let people know that this is your time. The rest of it could be shared, but this is your time. Just like, when you attend, I understand you are a faculty, so when you go to your classes, that's your time. So your family does not demand that time. You go out at that point in time to take your classes. Similarly, maybe a half an hour at home, or for a morning walk, or whatever, that is for you to decide, and that is for you to identify what would be a good way. But one has to do it if we need to survive and survive well.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, any other suggestion or question, queries? Uh, okay, madam, thank you. Hopefully, you have
Thank you.
another time slot,
Yes,
as you
yes,
told at the beginning.
yes.
Thank you very much, madam. And in future also, we may take your support. Sometimes the institute also organize some kind of counseling for the students, particularly for the BTech first year students. And they have the orientation program of 1 month. And
I know.
I hope
We
the
also follow
students,
the same.
yeah, and we'll definitely take that kind of support from you in future. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.